In Depth with Dr. Bren, A Path with Heart Series, Chapter 2. Stopping the War. When we step out of the battles, we see anew, as the Tao Te Ching says, with eyes unclouded by longing. Cornfield starts this chapter by saying, the unawakened mind tends to make war against the way things are. To follow a path with heart, we must understand the whole process of making war, within ourselves and without, how it begins and how it ends. He says that the root of these wars is ignorance. Without understanding, we can easily become frightened by life's fleeting changes, the inevitable losses, disappointments, the insecurity of our aging and death. Misunderstanding leads us to fight against life, running from pain or grasping at security and pleasures that by their nature can never be truly satisfying. In that paragraph, Cornfield describes the task of ego, that is, to flee pain and or to move towards pleasure and security. Since ego is the center of our physical being, these are appropriate tasks. However, what we fear and what we desire is suspect, meaning since we are discussing an unawakened mind, or what I call an unconscious mind, these fears and desires were programmed in childhood, when your ego was immature and unformed. Therefore, more than likely, these fears and desires are childish. Repetitive patterns in ego defense mechanisms are created unconsciously to avoid pain and to move towards pleasure. One such defense mechanism we learn from society is denial, which is in fact the most immature defense mechanism, or what is otherwise known as coping mechanism. Cornfield says, on page 23, contemporary society fosters our mental tendency to deny or suppress our awareness of reality. Ours is a society of denial that conditions us to protect ourselves from any direct difficulty and discomfort. We expend enormous energy denying our insecurity, fighting pain, death, and loss, and hiding from the basic truths of the natural world and of our own nature. That, in fact, is the war that he is suggesting we stop. Next, Cornfield connects addictions to denial. He says we use denial to turn away from the pains and difficulties of life. We use addictions to support our denial. Ours has been called the addicted society, with over 20 million alcoholics, 10 million drug addicts, and millions addicted to gambling, food, sexuality, unhealthy relationships, or the speed and busyness of work. Our addictions are the compulsively repetitive attachments we use to avoid feeling and deny the difficulties of our lives. Our addictions serve to numb us to what is, to help us avoid our own experience, and with great fanfare our society encourages these addictions. Cornfield, on page 24, references Anne Wilson Schaaf, author of When Society Becomes an Addict. She says, the best adjusted person in our society is the person who is not dead and not alive, just numb, a zombie. When you are dead, you're not able to do the work of society. When you are fully alive, you are constantly saying no to many of the processes of society, the racism, the polluted environment, the nuclear threat, the arms race, drinking unsafe water, and eating carcinogenic foods. Thus, it is in the interest of our society to promote those things that take the edge off, keep us busy with our fixes, and keep us slightly numbed out and zombie-like. In this way, our modern consumer society itself functions as an addict. Back to Cornfield. In a society that almost demands life at double time, speed and addiction numb us to our own experience. In such a society, it is almost impossible to settle into our bodies or stay connected with our hearts, let alone connect with one another or the earth where we live. Instead, we find ourselves increasingly isolated and lonely, cut off from one another and the natural web of life. One person in a car, big houses, cellular phones, Walkman radios clamped to our ears, and a deep loneliness and sense of inner poverty. That is the most pervasive sorrow in our modern society. Genuine spiritual practice requires us to learn how to stop the war. This is the first step, but actually it must be practiced over and over until it becomes our way of being. The inner stillness of a person who truly is peace brings peace to the whole interconnected web of life, both inner and outer. To stop the war, we need to begin with ourselves. Ironically, when we struggle to change ourselves, we, in fact, only continue the pattern of self-judgment and aggression. We keep the war against ourselves alive, such that acts of will usually backfire and end up often strengthening the addiction or denial we intend to change. The purpose of a spiritual discipline is to give us a way to stop the war, not by our force of will, but organically, through understanding and gradual training. Ongoing spiritual practice can help us cultivate a new way of relating to life in which we let go of our battles. So what is this first spiritual practice? Noticing, becoming aware, being conscious. At the moment we see a part of ourselves, we are no longer that, for that is what we are letting go of on our way to understanding our true nature, our soul, our heart. And when we notice, we begin to see our likes and our dislikes, the fight to resist all that frightens us. We see our prejudices, our greed, our territoriality, our competitiveness. All this is hard for us to look at, but it is really there. Then underneath these ongoing battles, we see our pervasive feelings of incompleteness and fear. We see how much our struggle with life has kept our heart closed. When we let go of our battles and open our heart to things as they are, then we come to rest in the present moment. This is the beginning and the end of spiritual practice. Only in this moment can we discover that which is timeless. Only here can we find the love that we seek. Love in the past is simply memory, and love in the future is fantasy. Only in the reality of the present can we love, can we awaken, can we find peace and understanding and connection with ourselves and the world.
When we first begin to notice the voices causing chaos in our heads, we become overwhelmed and distraught, which may send us back into our addiction, numbness, or speed. You may feel the task of stopping the war inside to be too hard and unachievable. My response to that is, you have already crossed the most difficult chasm. That is the threshold of a becoming, of being aware and noticing, waking up to your life. Prior to this moment, you were simply an automaton, an animal, not yet fully human. For to be human, one must wake up to their spiritual nature. To be or not to be is truly the question, for it is beingness that makes us human. In Jungian terminology, we call this process taking back one's shadow. What we have denied does not go away. It becomes one's shadow, repressed into one's unconscious. Back to Cornfield on page 26. To come into the present is to stop the war. To come into the present means to experience whatever is here and now. Most of us have spent our lives caught up in plans, expectations, ambitions for the future, and regrets, guilt, or shame about the past. When we come into the present, we begin to feel the life around us again, but we also encounter whatever we have been avoiding. We must have the courage to face whatever is present, our pain, our desires, our grief, our loss, our secret hopes, our love, everything that moves us most deeply. As we stop the war, each of us will find something from which we have been running. Our loneliness, our unworthiness, our boredom, our shame, our unfulfilled desires. We must face these parts of ourselves as well. To live in the present demands an ongoing and unwavering commitment. As we follow a spiritual path, we are required to stop a war, not once but many times. Over and over, we feel the familiar tug of thoughts and reactions that take us away from the present moment. When we stop and listen, we can feel how each thing that we fear or crave, really two sides of the same dissatisfaction, propels us out of our hearts and to a false idea of how we would like life to be. If we listen even more closely, we can feel how we have learned to sense ourselves as limited by the fear and identified with the craving. From this small sense of ourselves, we often believe that our own happiness can come only from possessing something or can be only at someone else's expense. Cornfield ends this chapter on page 29. Compassion and a greatness of heart arise whenever we stop the war. The deepest desire we have for our human heart is to discover how to do this. We all share a longing to go beyond the confines of our own fear or anger or addiction, to connect with something greater than I, me, and mine, greater than our small story and our small self. It is possible to stop the war and come into the timeless present, to touch a great ground of being that contains all things. This is the purpose of a spiritual discipline and of choosing a path with heart, to discover peace and connectedness in ourselves and to stop the war in us and around us. Now for the meditation. A meditation on stopping the war within. Sit comfortably for a few minutes, letting your body be at rest. Let your breathing be easy and natural. Bring your attention into the present. Sit quietly and notice whatever sensations are present in your body. In particular, be aware of any sensations, tensions, or pains you may have been fighting. Do not try to change them, simply notice them with an interested and kind attention. In each area of struggle you discover, let your body relax and your heart soften. Open to whatever you experience without fighting. Let go of the battle, breathe quietly, and let it be. Then, after a time, shift your attention to your heart and mind. Now notice what feelings and thoughts are present. In particular, be aware of any feelings or thoughts you are now struggling with, fighting, denying, or avoiding. Notice them with an interested and kind attention. Let your heart be soft. Open to whatever you experience without fighting. Let go of the battle. Breathe quietly and let it be. Continue to sit quietly, then cast your attention over all the battles that still exist in your life. Sense them inside yourself. If you have an ongoing struggle with your body, be aware of that. Have you been fighting inner wars with your feelings? Been in conflict with your own loneliness, fear, confusion, grief, anger, or addiction? Sense the struggle you have been waging. Notice the struggles in your thoughts as well. Be aware of how you have carried on the inner battles. Notice the inner armies, the inner dictators, the inner fortifications. Be aware of all that you have fought within yourself, of how long you have perpetuated the conflict. Gently, with openness, allow each of these experiences to be present. Simply notice each of them, in turn with interest and kind attention. In each area of struggle, let your body, heart, and mind be soft, open to whatever your experience without fighting. Let it be present just as it is. Let go of the battle. Breathe quietly and let yourself be at rest. Invite all parts of yourself to join you at the peace table in your heart. Thank you.